Namaste and welcome to Metaphysics, Mysticism, Movies, and More. The place where we talk about all things pop culture, movies, television, and more, but with or through the lens of metaphysics, mysticism, spirituality. How do these stories and cultural references impact and influence our lives in life-affirming ways or non-life affirming ways? I am your host, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson, and I will be your tour guide as we adventure through today's film. Are you ready? Well, before you even answer that, have you clicked subscribe, clicked like, and be ready to share? You ready? Did you do that? Okay, let's start. Today, what are we talking about? We are talking about the masterpiece of a film, Sinners. Note, as we go through this, many other influencers, podcasters, movie reviewers, etc., have already discussed sort of a scene-by-scene retelling of the story. That is not my intention. I have no desire to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. Once again, my goal, my intention is to pick certain key themes that relate spiritually, metaphysically, that we can then look at and say, what does this aspect of the story, how does this aspect of the story inform my life, inform how I show up? Then we contemplate, then we can embody, then we can transform. Now, if you are ready, let's go even further. Yes, spoiler alert, this is your warning now. Danger, Will Robinson, spoiler alert. While I will not be telling the entire movie scene by scene, I will be discussing key things that, for those of you who have not seen, first, why haven't you seen it yet? Second, for those who have not seen, I don't want to spoil anything. So save this for later, go see the film, come back. For the rest of us, let us dive in. As I said, there are key themes that we are going to sort of look at through the lens of, such as generational trauma. As we go through this adventure, look at various places where generational trauma shows its face, where cognitive imperialism shows its face, where we have the opportunity to identify, spiritual traditions, that's how it shows up. Assimilation, the idea of pursuit, where one can pursue a goal, but then there's the idea that it's a hunger. It's an uncontrollable craving. Pain and grief, white supremacy, which ties directly into cognitive imperialism, the concept of culture and community, acceptance, invitation, which we're going to find out directly in terms of the vampires have to be invited in. Let's talk about invitations. What about sin and salvation? What about negative peace? Reference specifically the way Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Letters from a Birmingham Jail spoke of the idea of the white moderates and their use of and their proclamation of negative peace versus positive peace or active peace. Indigenous wisdom and indigenous power and how it shows up, the idea and the energy of protection, peace and healing, and generational blessings. This is your invitation. Maybe screen capture this so you can come back and reference it as time goes on. But these are some of the themes, some of the ideas, some of the concepts that we will touch upon as we go. Now, we begin with the idea of characters. All stories have characters. And many of us don't pause to think about the archetypes that the characters represent. Now, there are many studies done about all kinds of ways one can break down and look at archetypes. Just for the sake of this, Jungian archetypes, where we find the hero. Who in our cast of characters matches the hero archetype, the nurturing mother archetype, the maiden archetype, sidekick, the villain? Who is the villain? What about the trickster, etc.? This is also our invitation to say, because archetypes reflect certain characteristics or psychological representations in our conscious and subconscious, where we show up as the hero, the sidekick, the nurturing mother, the maiden, the villain, etc. Where does the shapeshifter show up in our own lives, our own psyche, our own consciousness? We get to see how it plays out in these characters, in this story, but our invitation is to ask, where is this mirroring some aspect of me for me to learn me better? As it says in The Matrix when Neo goes to speak to the oracle above the door, Temet nosce, know thyself. The more we know ourselves, the greater our capacity. As Pythagoras said, when you know yourself, then you also know both God and the universe. When we can look at these characters and find ourselves there, we are getting to a deeper level of self-awareness. The film opens with a voiceover of Annie basically explaining that various cultures have a storyteller, someone who is a griot in the African tradition, a storyteller who has the power to both speak and bring music where the veil of reality blurs. The veil between past, present, future blurs. The veil between ancestors, those who are here now and those yet to be born, blurred. And all of them cross and come into the same space. The multiverse all comes together in the same space. Now, one may ask, because she says that these people, these powerful people, also in blurring the line, also invite, unintentionally, but invite dark, malevolent forces. Why? How? Wait. You're telling me that when I use my power to tell a story, there's also the yes, but why? If we look at some of what it says, a griot or a griot, what do they do? What are they? Poets, historians, advisors, diplomats, peacemakers, praise singers, interpreters, translators, composers, teachers, warriors, and witnesses. That's a lot of power. So when someone is standing in their power, which I'm sure we have seen many, many times throughout history, when someone stands in their power, something or someone that does not have that craves it and is attracted to it. The undead are attracted to the living because the living have something that the undead no longer have: life. This is an invitation, though, once again, invitation, for us to truly stand in our power. This is not an invitation to shy away from our power, because many would dim that light and turn the song down in order to avoid the attraction of. No, 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 no. Because as we're going to see in the story, even though one key character has this power, this trait, does it stop him? Does the fear hinder him? Or does he do it anyway? Breathe. Are you ready? Now, one of the things we're going to learn about Annie is that she is a practitioner of hoodoo. And in the story, there's going to be a place where she talks about where she believes that the people out there are haints, and haints basically an evil spirit, a ghost, some malevolent force, as is represented in the Gullah Geechee culture. Then she realizes, oh, no, 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 that's not what these are. These aren't ghouls or ghosts, goblins, etc. These are vampires. There's a wisdom that she possesses to recognize through what they appear to be. So once again, this blurring of the veil is a wisdom, is a power, is a talent and a skill that gives us the ability to see beyond the reality in our face. Now, just for the sake of conversation, because one of the things we're going to talk about is this idea of white supremacy and cognitive imperialism, and how colonization pushed all of this tradition out of the lives and the minds and the spirits of many African Americans, many Black folks. What was put in its place? Colonized Christianity. So one of the things this movie also gives us the opportunity, the invitation, is to peel back, to deconstruct and to decolonize our consciousness, our minds, our religion, our theology, and go back to our roots. Just for the sake of at least being open. Doesn't mean you have to practice it, but do you know your roots? Do you know the lineage and the history of whatever, whether it's Irish, whether it's Chinese, whether it's Japanese, whether it's Russian? Do you know the sacred traditions before any form of colonization, whether it's religious colonization, cultural colonization, before any of that came into being? How much of your past, your history, your ancestry are you connected to? And even beyond that, are you willing to be open to someone else's? So if someone else comes and says, yes, I am a practitioner of hoodoo, do you immediately go, be gone, thy evil spirit? Or do you say, oh, I've never heard of that. Tell me more. Oh, fascinating. Cool. You ready to go get some tea? So this is also an invitation into what true DEI is: diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. It is also the awareness of what it means to open ourselves to community. I am because you are. I am because we are. The ultimate concept of the beloved community. We see that in this film. Breathe. So we're introduced to Sammy, preacher boy, very early in the film. And very early on, we see him in a state of distress. Now, pause for a second and think about this. His nickname, Preacher Boy. Preacher, one who preaches, speaks the gospel, the good news, the truth, and to preach, a preacher, a minister, someone who ministers to others. Sammy embodies this in some pretty profound ways. Now, immediately we would think preacher boy, because his father is a preacher, a pastor of this church, which he is on his way into, once again in a state of distress. We would think it's because of that, and it is. But beneath the surface, it's also because even though he is not speaking, preaching the same gospel that his father does from the colonized Christianity version, Sammy finds his own gospel, his own good news, his own truth, which happens to be the blues. The blues. Now, normally we think of the blues as this music that references the pain of, the sadness of, the ability to overcome for Black people or people to overcome great hardships in life. And yes, but on a spiritual level, blue, as in one's chakras, blue, throat chakra, which we're going to talk about a little bit more with another character, one's creative expression, one's ability to speak, to create, to know that a thing is not and yet believe and speak it into being and then make it so. So Sammy, being a master of blues music, is also his ability to master creative expression, storytelling, the blurring of the line between veil of past, present, future, ancestors, right now, and yet to come, etc. He is a master of that chakra. And just as his father has a tool for his preaching, which is the Bible, and the various iconography, such as the cross behind his father, Sammy also has a Bible of his own. His Bible happens to be the guitar. That is the tool through which his artistry, yes, of course, his body, but he also uses a specific tool as the means. And we come to find out later as the story goes that this guitar was owned by someone extremely abusive. And yet Sammy took it and transmuted the energy of damage and pain, trauma into, he took a generational curse and created a generational blessing. Now, as I said before, referencing the archetypes, we are invited to pause and think about where in our own lives do we identify our creative expression? What are the tools that we use to connect with, to minister to others, to serve others, to show up in this world, knowing who and what we are, rather than bowing down simply to the cognitive imperialism that says you need to be what we are. You need to fit in. In this scene, his father is telling him, just let go of the music and let them blues. It's the devil's music, etc., etc. Why would the blues be devil music? Because that is what cognitive imperialism does. It brainwashes you into thinking that white is right and anything else is not. Blues, deeply rooted in Black culture, that doesn't align with the slave Bible or white Christianity. It doesn't. So clearly that's wrong. That's bad. That's evil. And Sammy's father even tells him at a different point, he says, you keep dancing with the devil, and sooner or later, you're going to invite him on in. You're going to bring him home with you. Why say that? If you use your gifts and blessings, you're inviting evil. Now, it has a double meaning because, as Annie said at the opening, the haints, the vampires, the ghouls, the goblins, the malevolent spirits are drawn to that power. Yes, but that does not mean be afraid of it. It means stand more resolutely in it. So if and when they show up, you also have the power and the fortitude to use your tools, your gifts, and your talents to cast them away and banish them. Right? I like this one image where we see him holding the guitar with the cross directly behind him, because it very, very, very clearly also represents the idea that for Sammy, that guitar represents salvation. It represents the thing that saves or can save, because it is the thing that connects. It is the thing that binds. As we're going to find out, his cousins Smoke and Stack, the twins, they bring him into the juke joint specifically because his method of preaching fills the church of the juke joint in the same way that his father's preaching fills the church. His version of the juke joint, Christian juke joint, versus a good time partying juke joint. They're doing the same thing in very different ways. And so this image gives us an opportunity to see, the symbolism. As I said, the twins, both masterfully played by one single actor, Michael B. Jordan. We have Smoke and we have Stack. Easiest way to tell them apart: Smoke, blue hat; Stack, red hat. Now, immediately from there, it brings to mind some very clear imagery for me. Twins, immediately I get the idea of Gemini. But before we go there, so Smoke, talking once again about the chakras. Smoke, blue hat, blue theme, the energy of, because Smoke is more of the communicator. He speaks with and talks to, while Stack is red chakra, the root chakra. He's more rooted and grounded in the idea of a good time. Smoke wants the good time to work, so he's about planning and structure to ensure that this good time rolls. Red chakra, grounded, rooted, the baser elements. Stack wants to make sure people have a good time, right? We got the beer and the wine that we got from Chicago, stole from Chicago, and we got like, okay, like we got to make sure everybody has a good time, that primalness of sensuality and passion. And once again, Smoke is the negotiator, the communicator, the one who is ensuring in a certain way that, yes, that, but we also need signage and advertisement, and we need the food, and we need various other things in place to ensure. So the twins, wow, yes, representing that. They also very clearly represent other symbolic energies as well. Once again, Gemini, the twins, positive traits. They're curious, inquisitive, adventurous, open-minded, nimble. Some negatives that they reference: manipulative, restless, cunning. So they were working up in Chicago and dealing with some mob folks, and were able to pit the two, the Italian mob and the Irish, and fighting each other and whatnot, like, oh, snap. And they stole some beer and wine and, got out of Dodge. They're cunning. They're smart. They also served in the war and survived. Cunning and smart. Or Smoke did. So also one of the colors that represents them is yellow, which, interestingly enough, when we think of the vampires and the sun and sunlight, yellow. Gemini people are intelligent and quick-witted, as I said. Masculine energies, very strong with these two, yes. So once again, the invitation is to pause and think about, where does this energy show up in you? Now, not only that, these two also very clearly represent the yin and yang energy, right? The divine masculine, the divine feminine, the positive, the negative, the dark, the light. Even to the degree that as the story gets closer to the end, one brother is clearly sun and the other is clearly moon. Dun, 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 dun. I'm gonna leave that there for now. Moving on. We see the brothers having conversation with this white gentleman who we find out later is a member of the clan. He sells them the property. They warn him about if any of your clan members come here, now that this is our property, we're going to shoot them on the spot. The guy says, there is no clan anymore. Once again, the shapeshifter, the one who tricks, or the trickster, the one who is deceitful and lies. Because he is planning a very strategic, I'm going to get this building filled with Black folks, then I and my hooded brothers are going to come here and we're going to slaughter them. But in this moment, he is acting as the real estate agent who solely is here to ensure that, and yet he's not. Breathe. So later in the story, we find Smoke and Stack and Sammy going to pick up the truck that has the beverages in the back. And as Sammy lifts the tarp, there's a rattlesnake that jumps out. And we find a couple of things. One, this is a foreshadowing of when the brothers protect Sammy, which we even found prior to this, because when they go to the church to pick him up, they ask him, is your dad treating you okay? So they're already in protection mode of him. And then the story moves. And then we find Stack tosses Smoke his knife, and Smoke stabs the snake in the top of the head, killing it. The snake, one could very easily say, oh, that represents foreshadowing the vampires and venom and poison and death. And yes, without a doubt. But underneath that, snakes also represent the idea of transformation and healing. Snakes can also represent the idea of taking the venom and using the venom to create anti-venom. You use the generational curses, you transform it, and it becomes the generational blessings through this alchemical process where you change the energy. You change the trauma into triumph. So the snake represents far more than just the enemy. We even have the idea of the warning, the how many different places do we see the warning occurring in the story? How many places did we see the warning, but we didn't even realize it was a warning, such as the previous slide where the Klansman, that we don't know is a Klansman, there's a warning. Is this white man to be trusted? Even the brothers are like, excuse me. Then there's possible guns and a knife, or is there getting ready to be bloodshed? We are getting various signs of who truly can be trusted. And in that, what are we called to do? As the story progresses, we end up going to the train station where Stack is going to find a very particular musician, which we're going to get to in a moment. And as this is going on, we get to see this farmhouse, and is the first time we're introduced to Remick as we see him running to the house, and he bangs on the door, and he's like distraught. We may not specifically, well, we know now, but we may not know initially what's going on with this man. Why is he all burned all up? And we find Remick's character begging the occupants of the house to bring him in. Now, Remick as a character is very interesting, and we're going to dissect him a little more as time goes on. Because Remick, is he the enemy? Is he the villain? Yes, but not necessarily as overtly as it's easy to say. We're going to talk about. When he gets to the door, we meet Joan and we meet Bert. They are the two who live in the house and open the door. They immediately draw guns. Remick spies behind Bert, some clan robes. Warning. He begs, says there's some bad guys chasing him. They want to kill him. Please let me in, which apparently they do, because then we see the Choctaw arriving at their house. They ride up. They knock on the door. Only Joan answers the door, and I don't know if you saw this guy, but he's a real bad guy. He's really dangerous. He's not what you think he is. And Joan is like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yada smackada, yakada smackada. And one of the other Choctaw notice the sun's on its way down. They're like, we got to bounce. So they get back on their horses and they go. At which point, Joan goes back in the house and she realizes Bert laying on the floor. Why Bert laying on the floor? And Remick's sitting in the chair with blood all over his face. And he like, what? And she's, hey, what the? She screams. He goes, hush up now. He's fine. You gonna be fine too. At which point she looks over. She sees Bert start to get up. She's like, what in the world? We know what has happened at that point. We now know Vampire 1 made Vampire 2. Now there are 3. 3, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. 3, 2 twins and Sammy. Are we sensing a theme? As the story goes on, we meet Grace Chow. She ends up being the young woman who does the signage for the juke joint. And Grace, very interestingly, is going to represent in a different fashion what it means to truly invite and why we invite trouble when we think what we're doing is protecting. Whew. She is married to Bo Chow, who is great friends with, I'm assuming, both brothers, but Smoke is the one that goes and communicates and speaks to them and tells them what he needs and his brother needs for this juke joint, and gets them to help along with food and some groceries and whatnot, and they agree because they're friends. However, which we're going to see in a moment, their daughter doesn't seem as friendly or as welcoming or as open. Is she sensing something? Just a thought. As I mentioned at the beginning, we started with Annie doing a voiceover, Annie being the love interest of Smoke. We get the feeling, I can't remember if they said it outright or not, but we get the feeling that she's an estranged wife. We find out that the two of them lost a child. We are introduced to Annie as a practitioner of hoodoo. Smoke is a little skeptical. Annie makes a comment and says, you still got that hoodoo bag I gave you, don't you? And he's like, yeah. Okay, how you know that my hoodoo in that bag isn't what protected you in the war, isn't what protected you and your brother, isn't what's protecting you and your brother now? Foreshadowing. Because we find out later that that bag does protect him. So once again, thinking of what are each of these characters representing? What is the archetype that she is inviting us to embody? The wisdom, the education, the skill and knowledge, not just that she has with hoodoo, but she's one of the ones that becomes, she's the cook. So the ability to put her foot in the meal and nourish people. She nourishes them with her power. She nourishes them with her knowledge. She nourishes them in many ways. How do we do the same? How are we invited to do the same? So in the story, we see Smoke visiting the grave of their child. They have a conversation and then sex. The energy of sex. Now, is it not interesting that both of them wear blue, have various blue jewelry, blue shirt, blue tie, blue hat, blue? Once again, we could break down all of the, lapis lazuli, which is a blue crystal, and what that symbolically represents and energetically represents. And as I mentioned, the chakras. This is just an opportunity to pause and realize color has power. You say, what? You don't see color? Go sit down somewhere. Ain't nobody trying to listen to that nonsense. Assimilationist. Color has power. How can we use color in what we wear, how we dress, to represent and express a certain energy, a certain characteristic, a certain attribute of our mind, body, heart, and soul? Just a question. As I mentioned before, Stack goes to the railroad station specifically to find this gentleman, Delta Slim, another master of the blues, right? So now we have the generational, we have the older master of the blues who's been doing it for years. And then we have Sammy, who wants to do it. He has the skill, he has the talent, he just hasn't had the opportunity. They're bringing them together. One generation and another generation, intergenerational sharing, community coming together. We're not casting the older people aside. We are bringing them in because we know the gifts that they have for the next generation. Just saying. And referencing trauma, grief, and pain, Delta Slim is going to tell a story of a lynching And there's great angst and pain in how he's telling the story and feeling of it. And then there is a transition into how music is used to heal. And yet, even in that, Delta Slim is an alcoholic. Now, he's not the only one that we find at the train station. We find other community members, some known, some not known, some yet to be known, because it is at the train station where Delta Slim meets Sammy, and there's a little bit of musical stuff going on, but we also meet Mary at the train station. And we find out that Mary is the love interest of Stack. Also at the train station, we meet Pearline, who is going to become the love interest, although she's married, the love interest of Sammy. To such a degree, oops, spoilers? Not yet. We'll get there later. But this is where we meet these individuals as well. So again, there's a 3, because at the train station, Stack brings 3 new people into the story. Even if we went back to Smoke, there were 3 people in that unit: him, Annie, their child. Just saying. Just saying. You ready? Okay, let's go on to the next piece. Okay, cool. Later on in the story, we're going to meet Cornbread. We find him out in the fields with his wife as they're picking cotton. Now, once again, thinking about the archetypes. Who is Cornbread? Cornbread is that friend that you can rely on. That sidekick that when you need a helping hand, Cornbread's going to be there. Can he always be trusted? So as I said, at the bottom, you see that's when they were riding in the car with Delta Slim, Preacher Boy, Cornbread, and Stack. And this is in the scene where Delta Slim tells the story of the lynching and expresses the trauma. But in all of this train station stuff, and even when they go to pick up Cornbread, there are elements of where we see the remnants of slavery, that whole consciousness of white supremacy and what it does, because it's white supremacy that lynched Delta Slim's friend and brought that trauma upon them, and all of that stuff, mutilated his body, all of that white supremacy, cognitive imperialism, assimilation. And we find a lot of that here. We meet Mary. Is Mary a white woman? Because that's what Sammy, they're like, who's this white woman? And then we find out Mary is of what many people would, because I've seen many, other YouTube posts or whatnot, and they refer to her as what they would have referred to her back then as a mulatto, someone of mixed race, biracial, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But it's the idea of who is Mary? Because the question, what is Mary, comes up. Which is more important, the what or the who? Or are they both important? Why do I even mention this? Because oftentimes we get stuck in which question is the actual question. We really trying to figure out in this. Who are you really? We even see this with Mary. We find dual in terms of her ethnicity, her race, some form of duality. But we also find this with Pearline. She's married, but she's flirting as though she's available. Yes, I sing, but will I sing at your juke joint? And then there's this playfulness and flirtiness of, but you're a married woman. So with both of them, we are given a sense of, but what are we seeing? What are we getting? Who are we seeing and who are we getting? Once again, at the grocery store in the upper corner, you see the child of the Chows. And as I said, she seems a little skeptical. But in this scene, after Smoke leaves the grocery store, we find out that Smoke is a very no nonsense. Once again, he's about business. And he communicates oftentimes with violence. As he sees two gentlemen trying to rob the truck of its liquor, he shoots one in the butt. And then he ends up shooting the other one simply on principle to say, I can't have you going around telling people that you tried to rob the twins and got away unharmed. So I got to shoot you anyway. But then he goes into the store and gives them money to pay for a doctor to take care of them. So even though he's hurting them, he also knows the principle or the integrity of make sure they're taken care of. And yet, we are given great insight into the character of Smoke because as the story goes, we find out that Smoke used violence to protect his brother from their father who was abusing Stack. Smoke killed their father to protect his brother, to end the abuse. And it's their father's guitar that they gave Sammy and then told Sammy that it belonged to some famous blues musician, but it belonged to their father. And they're shocked that Sammy can take such or bring such or express such beauty from that guitar when they know in whose hands it once was played. How do we take our pain and our trauma and our blues and turn the lead into gold? How do we communicate? Do we communicate with violence? Whether it's actual violence or violent words, how do we communicate? Once again, the archetypes offer us greater insight into not just these characters, but our own character. As I said before, these individuals, once again, three, the mother, the father, and the daughter, give us insight into another aspect of culture, which, as I said before, many other folks have referenced the idea of the Asian community or Asian Americans within Black culture and in the South, and how the various cultures interwove one another into one another and benefited one another until the idea of white supremacy, assimilation, cognitive imperialism, and proximity to whiteness showed up. And then many of those close knit, which we don't see in the film, but many of those close knit bonds started to weaken and fray for that reason. I do mention that specifically because the concept of assimilation, cognitive imperialism, and white supremacy, we do see in this film. We do see how it begins, specifically the virus of the vampires, how it breaks down the bonds of friendship, the bonds of family, the bonds of community. We see how this virus infects and then breaks down and then attacks and then assimilates. We do see that. So culturally, we understand that there's a whole true story of that, and we see representation symbolically of that in the film. Now, as the movie goes on, we're at the juke joint, everybody partying, gambling, dancing, having fun, singing, eating. Oh, yeah, it's a good old time in paradise. And in there, this is when Sammy then highlights his skills, comes forward, and begins to play and sing. And it is at this time that we see his gift express. We see how his music, spiritually, symbolically, metaphysically, mystically, is expressed as the generations of people showing up in the room. We see people from Africa dancing and playing music. We see a DJ on a turnstile that we know is from the future. We see someone who's sort of like an Alvin Ailey dancer, which we know is from the future. We see all manner of people showing up in this space as a demonstration of how Sammy's music blurs the veil. We also see, because remember, who's in the room? We also see Chinese representation show up in the space. Now, at this point, the building's gone. Why the building on fire? Why the building burned down? Why the building burned down? Fire gives illumination. Fire brings life. Fire is transformative. And in the symbolism of the building burning down, it's the idea that this building, just as church is about the people, the community is about the people, not about this building, not about this space. So the building and the space, the facade goes, and think of it this way. Church, the concept of church can generally or is generally used in three ways. Church is the building. Do you go to church on Sunday? Church is the people, like the minister may say, and let the church say amen, talking to the congregation. And then thirdly, church is referenced as the teaching, because people talk about those who are churched and those who are unchurched, those who know and those who don't know, those who have been given the gospel and those who haven't. Three references. So in this, we see the building, the church, fall away. But what's left? The church, the people. What's left? The church, the teaching, the music, the connection, the blending of ancestry, forward, backward, and present, all in one space. And it is this, as Annie said at the very beginning, that brings the malevolent spirits, because Remick feels it. And one of the things, like a moth to a flame, Remick is drawn to it, to which he brings Joan and Bert, because they are now of one mind, which we find out that when this happens, one-minded, because later Remick's going to speak Chinese. But how? Exactly. He's going to get somebody who knows Chinese, and it's not Grace. I did warn you about spoilers in the beginning, so don't be mad. This is when Remick now, I need him. I need that power. Now, what does he mean? If he bites Sammy, he gets Sammy's power. Remick then has the ability to create music himself and bring his own ancestors and stuff to bear. Because Remick is cut off, which we find out. Remick is cut off from all of that because he is the undead. And when Annie says, oh no, these are vampires, and vampires, one of the things they are cut off from. That is their fate, their curse, their destiny now. The soul cannot move on, which means they can never connect with their ancestors. So Remick is isolated. The only connection he has is the connection with those he absorbs, those he assimilates. We are Borg, right? Remick is like the Borg from Star Trek. He assimilates. They, in essence, they lose their autonomy, their individuality, because he now has taken it upon himself. He is the prime and they are the beta. They are the subordinates. So they show up at the juke joint and, they're like, hey, can we come in? They're like, oh, who are you? What y'all white folks doing here? Y'all should be at some other juke joint somewhere else. This ain't the place to be. And Remick is like, oh, but y'all let that white woman in. And they're like, and Annie's like, she family. She belong here. Once again, the idea of what does it mean to belong? Who's in, who's out? Why are we in? Why are we out? Why are we in, they're out? Why vice versa? What does that mean? What is community? What is family? Now, as the story progresses, there's Mary has the, I look like them, so let me go talk to them. She goes out there and she's like, so who are y'all? What's up? And there's a brief chit chat or whatnot, but very quickly she gets the sensation like, oh, y'all, something going on. Remick turns around, looks at her, and Remick is drooling. Remember the idea of pursuit and hunger. Remick is hungry. Mary starts to make her way back to the juke joint. Remick flies in the air, goes over. We know what happens. So the next time we see her, she's strolling on back into the juke joint. Cornbread and them, they come on, you already been here. Come on in. She was invited in. We know what that means. Now, in this, what does it mean to fraternize with the enemy? Who is the enemy? How do we know they're the enemy? Is it obvious? Are there, as Dr. King said, the white moderates who we believe to be allies and friends, and yet when it comes down to actually making change, they talk more about negative peace. Can't we all just get along? If we just pray and kumbaya, then eventually, no, we should be out in the streets marching and protesting and protecting in order to change. We have to attest to, no, no, let's just go bow our heads and let us just pray. Let us just pray. And okay, so you want negative peace versus positive peace, which is active. You want sacred passivity versus activity. You want to just sit in the energy of stagnation rather than movement, motivation, and you're comfortable. Do we find any of that energy here? Because we're going to find out at a later time where Remick is going to say, which actually we didn't even need to find it later because it actually happened before, where Remick says, we're good. Like the clan they planned, look, I'm in their heads and their clan, or they were, but the clan's planning on coming here tomorrow morning and killing all of y'all. But if you let us in, that won't happen. I'm your friend. I can help you. But the only help you can offer is the help of destroying our lives. Is that really help? So nonetheless, she's in now, and we find out that her and Stack go away. They doing their little hoochie coochie and whatnot, and pumping and grinding, and all of a sudden there's biting and sucking. And not the fun sucking, it's the other sucking. Anyhow, you know what I'm saying. So we find out, and then there's pound, 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 door busting, and at which point she stands up, she's like, we go kill all of y'all. What in the world? Boom, she gets out. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but now cat's out of the bag. So we get to the part where Stack now comes back. So what does it mean? Let's go back for a second. What does it mean to not know that you're sleeping with the enemy? Because she's been turned. She's now part of the one mind that is Remick's mind. She's no longer who Stack fell in love with, per se. What does that look like? What does that mean? To believe you can trust someone, to know that someone that you are close to has become assimilated, now drinks from the well of cult mentality, is a sort of passive, aggressive, side adjacent element, tool, or weapon of white supremacy. What does that mean? What does that look like? Go on. So at this point now, shit done hit the fan. Everybody's like, what in the world is going on? Everybody's scared. Delta Slim done said he shat his pants. Everybody, what in the Stacked and came back. They're like, oh, but he was dead a second ago. So yes, everybody is up in arms. Cornbread at the door, because Cornbread went out to go take a pee, and at which time he became part of the we. So he a vampire, but he came to the door and he like, can I come in? And they're like, what you mean, can you come in? Your fat ass been coming in and out of here all day. Why you need an invitation now? So he chit-chatting and whatnot. But once again, Smoke, in handing him money, is snatched and almost bitten in the arm. And so once again, here's the idea of one by one by one, community, smaller and smaller and smaller, as this bigger and bigger and bigger. How does the energy of that dismantle the Black community, the Asian community? the LGBTQ community. How does white supremacy and cognitive imperialism and all of this stuff, how does it hurt and harm these where, oh, you mean like gentrification? How does this consciousness, this energy, cause these to enfold or devolve or crumble and wither? Whereas before colonization, before all of that, they thrived, they flourished, they burned the joint down until. So now, everybody out there with Remick, well, not everybody, the vast majority are out there with Remick, except for our main key characters. Been turned, Grace's husband turned, Cornbread out there dancing the Irish jig with them in the circle, and everybody, they doing the whole river dance thing. Yeah, everybody, it's all good. Meanwhile, on the inside, they're like, wait, what we gonna do? We gotta stay here overnight. So they armed themselves. Annie had pickled garlic and threw that water and burned, and they got Molotov cocktails and steaks and like stuff, because Annie shared from my knowledge, this is what you do to combat vampires: silver and stake to the heart and garlic, fire, right? Because shooting them damages but doesn't kill, because they shot Mary several times and Mary still got it. So they know, shot Cornbread in the head, and Cornbread was like, oh, you busted my pimple, and Cornbread still got it. So they know gun will hurt, temporarily immobilize, it will not kill. So they're getting ready for war. Once again, what tools do we have at our employ that we can use to protect and save our lives? Now, one key point in this, as I mentioned earlier, Grace, her invitation, Grace, in her grief and fear for her daughter's safety, because they threatened her daughter, either you come on out and join us, or we will go back to the town and visit your daughter. So Grace is like, so she says, all right, you bastards, come on in. At which point, all hell breaks loose. They all come in, they fight. Let's go back a second. They fight. There's a point where Smoke and Stack are fighting. And it looks like Stack is going to bite Smoke. But as I mentioned, his hoodoo bag he couldn't get close enough to bite. So we don't know exactly what happened. It appeared that Smoke killed him. Annie gets bitten, so Smoke has to kill her, because that was, she asked. So once again, there's the idea of, what does love ask of us? Does love say, I need you to be around for me? Or does love say, I will honor what you are asking for? You do not want to live as an undead vampire, so I will honor you and end your life that you may join the ancestors, join our daughter. What does love ask us to do? Love is asking us to protect community. Love is asking us to protect one another. The archetypes work together in such a way that it strengthens versus weakens. Because it certainly appears that through all of this, they're weak, yet they're not. Not in the grand scheme of things. So, as I said, fight ensues. Pearline then got turned. It just all kind of Delta Slim, like bites galore, just all kind of stuff. So Sammy ends up hitting Remick in the head with the guitar. The silver part sticks in Remick's head. Silver, purity. That's why silver bullets, silver cross, silver, because of the purity of the metal against that which is the unpure. So Remick is injured, and it's an interesting note that I saw somewhere where someone said that there are various symbolism of Sammy's dad and then Remick. Sammy's dad and then Remick. Sammy's dad trying to embrace and then Remick trying to embrace. Interesting parallels throughout. Nonetheless, Sammy strikes him, and then smoke comes out, and smoke stake to the heart as the sun comes up, which we then see Remick bursting into flames. The other vampires, many die in flames and stuff, and blah, all kind of stuff, right? They stand there shocked and in awe at what they are witnessing as Remick vanishes between the attack, the stake, between the guitar, the stake, and the sun. Remick is no more. What does it mean for us to transform our trauma, the thing that attacks us, whatever that trauma may be, that internal villain, right? Internalized racism. What's needed to set it ablaze and cast it out? Internalized homophobia or homomisia. What's needed to cast it out and set it aflame? Because once again, fire, the symbol of transformation, transmutation, alchemy. Whatever the trauma is, what are the tools? What is the method that we are using to transform them, including the collective trauma of racism, sexism, capitalism, etc.? What are the tools and what is the method that we are using to transform, transmute, transmogrify, metamorph, all of that stuff? Smoke sends Sammy back. So that's when Sammy, when we find him at the beginning of the movie in the car going to the church, because Smoke sent him away. Smoke gets his military stuff because he remembers Remick said the Klan coming there in the morning. So Smoke is prepping he ready to whoop some ass. So the Klan show up. Well, first he removed his hoodoo bag because he's like, what's the point? There's no reason for protection anymore. My brother, like, there's no reason anymore. So they show up, shoot, and killed pretty much everybody. The main guy who sold them the property, he's the last man standing. Well, actually, he's laying on the ground. There's some fussing and cussing, and the guy like, I'll give you money. Listen here. I know jet planes ain't made yet because they're gonna be in the future. Like, no, he didn't actually say that, but he's bargaining for his life. And doesn't matter, Smoke even got shot. And he sees Annie and their child. So he's between worlds now. And he kills the guy. And then, of course, we know he dies and he's reunited with his wife or the mother of his child. I'm going to say his wife and his child. And then, as I said, we see the full scene of Sammy once again back at the church with his father, and we get the idea once again because his father's like, let the music go, just drop the guitar, son, just drop the guitar. So we don't know if he did or if he didn't until we get to the post-credit scene. And in the post-credit scene, that's when we fast forward and we see Sammy as a much older gentleman playing in his own club called Pearline, named after his first sexual experience and the woman that he loved during this attack. And then later we see Stack and Mary show up. They're still alive. At which point Stack says, yeah, I smelled, you're getting close to your time, and I thought I'd come and offer you eternal life, basically. Sammy says no. He's made peace. He's lived a nice, full life. Why didn't you kill me, or why didn't you come earlier? And Stack says, it's going back. Stack says, Smoke made me promise that if he let me live, I'd leave you alone. So I left you alone. Once again, what would love have you do? Now, I would venture to say that Stack and Mary now are more autonomous as their own vampires because Remick is dead. So I don't know how the one mind works with them since their originator, their creator, has been killed. But nonetheless, they didn't just spontaneously combust with his death. So they lived and have moved along with the times, as we see in their clothing and whatnot. So once again, there's the idea of how do we choose to live our lives? Sammy chose not to relinquish his gift. He chose to use his gift and become a professional blues singer. I would venture to say potentially he may have even attracted more malevolent spirits. Sammy didn't care. Sammy faced and survived and knew who and what he was. And then in the second post-credit scene, we see a flashback of him sitting in the church singing "This Little Light of Mine." Isn't it interesting? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And that's precisely what he did. Precisely. He was singing his own mantra of, I'm going to be attacked, I'm going to survive, and I'm going to have a choice. And I'm choosing to let my light shine. Because it is precisely my light that vanquishes creatures of the dark, the malevolent creatures. It is precisely the purity and the power of my generational blessings that heals the generational curses. I'm going to let that shine. So as I said, and I didn't honor everything that I said, because I said I was going to break down a lot more of the spiritual correlations, but I got caught up in the story because the story's so good. So if you are interested, feel free to reach out and we can discuss and whatnot some more of the spiritual, metaphysical, and mystical symbolism in there. But I wanted to share that with you since Sinners is so hot right now and let you know some of my thoughts related to it. And now I'll give you my rating. What out of 5 do I give it? Yeah, 3 isn't good enough. 6 isn't good enough. 6 flames, a star, and I'm gonna burn this juke joint up. That's how great the film is. It is already automatically a classic. It is a film to watch frequently, once a year. Pick an event, gather with friends and family, sit down, turn it on, and watch it, and then discuss the metaphysical, the cultural, the political aspect. Like, it has so many, it doesn't matter. The educational, the historical, the political, the social commentary, the psychological commentary, it's so rich, so rich, so rich. So that being the case, we are now at the end of our time together. So until next time, blessings, peace, and I'll see you at the movies. Namaste.